Well, thank you everyone for being here today. Just want to say a massive thank you to our sponsors, Circle, Flowdesk, Hyperdash, Native Markets, our presenting sponsors today. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. Also want to say thank you to all of our standard sponsors, our organizers, as well as all of our panelists. Hyperliquid Global is like a labor of love. We did this like purely for the love of Hyperliquid and came together as a community initiative to make it just come to life. And so just a huge round of applause for everybody. It was a community initiative, so thank you. Anyway, so to get us started today, we've got Matt from Circle, Hanson from Flowdesk, Fu from Hyperdash, and Drew from Native Markets. We're going to talk a little bit about Hyperliquid's meteoric rise and kind of what's next on the horizon. As Jeff would say, job's not finished. So I guess for anyone who's not really familiar with Hyperliquid, which I'm not sure if that's anyone in this room, but Hyperliquid, obviously in the last couple of years, has just absolutely exploded within the crypto scene, absolutely dominating in on-chain perps volume, open interest, becoming a top 10 smart contract platform as well. And they did all of this with no marketing budget almost, a team of 11 people, and no VC funding. And so quite a meteoric feat. Hasn't really been anything like it since Bitcoin. So just to get us started, how do they do this? Matt, you want to get us started? We'll go down the line, but after this, we can do it family style, and whoever wants to kind of just jump in, we'll go from there.
For sure. And thanks for coming out, everyone. So I would say that Hyperliquid's biggest advantage over the last few years was focusing really on the fundamentals of liquidity, user experience, execution. On top of that, Hyperliquid has proven that you don't need copious amounts of VC funding if you can get your community engaged with the growth of the protocol and of the ecosystem. I think Jeff and the team have done a really unique job of making the ecosystem feel like family and like home to folks that are part of it, and using things like HIP3, HyperEVM, et cetera, to give builders a chance to really align with the growth of Hyperliquid specifically. So it's unique. I don't think it's going to be easy for a lot of teams to replicate that, but to me, that's the playbook.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, the biggest feature that Hyperliquid was able to have that other teams didn't was HLP. They didn't need to pay for liquidity. They could just basically, they built it themselves or managing the liquidity. And in the exchange game, liquidity begets liquidity. And as well as when you have a good product, it's very hard to lose.
Yeah, I think to echo what the guys have said, Hyperliquid, the team itself is arguably one of the best teams that exists today. They, focused on building a product that people cared about and loved and used. And my thinking there is that product market fit is the only thing that matters at scale, and they absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, echo all of that. I would say distribution with builder codes definitely huge in terms of getting out into the community and letting different platforms showcase the product. Relentless product execution and market structure. Obviously very transparent and solid market structure for both takers and makers. And then also just the Hyperliquid Labs team, being kind of like Switzerland, being neutral across all the different builders, not really making anybody and just giving everybody a fair shot to build across the protocol. I think those things are all have contributed.
I wanted to touch a little bit on what you said, Matt, about how you think it's going to be hard to replicate. They created something so special and it feels like family. And I share that view. But obviously there's been, a lot of different perps dexes, and just as it is with crypto, there's, one first mover and then, 10 or 20 come along and try to do it. But at the end of the day, I'm curious, maybe Fu, we can start with you. You see the metrics, at Hyperdash. All the incumbents, so Aster, Lighter, Extended, they had their points programs. Did liquidity move over? Did it come back? Like, how sticky really is the liquidity to Hyperliquid as the first mover and with this kind of ecosystem it's created?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to Hyperliquid just being a great product, the most liquid venue on chain. Yes, there is mercenary capital out there that will migrate their capital to other opportunities, but if you just look at how OI has changed post other platforms and their points program, people tend to come back to Hyperliquid and trade. And so I would say that Hyperliquid has done a great job of focusing on that trader retention. And, builders like us, we are enhancing that experience to make sure that traders get the best execution and the best experience on Hyperliquid.
That's true. That's a good point. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just like a data point there. Look at volumes and open interest post the Hyperliquid airdrop. A lot of people were just kind of calling it another perp dex at the beginning, and we've seen that's the complete opposite of reality. So it's kind of proof is in the pudding, basically.
Yeah, I think they've been leading with with HIP3 markets, just being able to bootstrap those quickly and bring in quality builders, deployers, and liquidity providers alike to build kind of a hedge to the crypto ecosystem, where you can trade commodities, equities, bond indices, etc. I think that's been huge as well.
Yeah, I'll add one piece. I would say that while other perps venues have replicated a lot of the Hyperliquid UX and emulated it in many ways, I don't think any other ecosystem has as actively found ways to create economic value for its participants as Hyperliquid, which is ultimately a lot of what this comes down to. So, yeah.
That's a good point. All good points. You touched on HIP3, and we're going to get there a little bit. But first, I kind of want to talk about just comparing. We've compared, Hyperliquid to different dexes, but I also want to talk about just comparing it to, centralized exchanges on the perps vertical. It's been forever since Binance and other exchanges in the centralized world have just like absolutely dominated non-chain perps. But Hyperliquid is now, I believe, 15% of open interest of Binance or creeping up there. And I'm curious, like, what do you guys think is the reason for that? If historically centralized exchanges have been able to offer, really great liquidity and execution, are we catching up with that? I know that Jeff, sorry, it's a long question, but Jeff mentioned, tweeted the other day about how Hyperliquid has silently becoming the best place, the deepest liquidity order book for Bitcoin. What do you guys think about that, and how far are we away from flipping Binance? Anyone, feel free to get started.
Yeah, I'm not gonna comment on the timeframes, but I think going back to some of the things that we harped on previously, like it's market structure and transparency. I think a lot of people have been fed up with the centralized exchange perp trading model. Some people have been, I have felt that they've been unfairly hunted, and the experience hasn't been as good as it was in kind of the early days of centralized exchange perps. So I think that's really key. And I think also most people use centralized exchanges, like the first kind of gateway to perps is use an exchange as kind of like a neobank. And so Hyperliquid was not only a great product, but people are starting to build different products around that will give you kind of the same similar product set and different things that you can do on the platform.
Yeah, I think the birth and growth of Hyper EVM has been really critical as well. Folks don't want to take their capital off chain when they're trading, and by creating kind of this like sidechain environment where you can have borrow lends and other types of use cases, you create a built-in credit layer for the exchange. And the whole thing is just an endless flywheel that centralized exchanges don't have in the same way. So that's been exciting.
I think on that point too, the Hyperliquid team was very quick to add new features and new listings, which is basically made it the de facto platform to trade these new launches before the centralized exchanges could even list them. So they were very quick to market with these new listings, and that kind of led to just this natural cohort of users having to come here and onboard to Hyperliquid to trade those assets.
Yeah, to echo what Hanson said, I think HIP3, listings in general have been a huge catalyst in Hyperliquid's growth. With HIP3, that has now been decentralized, where any team can come in and deploy markets that people want exposure to. And you saw this with the metals run not too long ago, where Hyperliquid was arguably one of the only venues on chain where you could get exposure to gold and silver and other commodities that people wanted access to.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, like HIP3 and I guess also HIP4. Is it HIP or HIP? I guess it doesn't really matter. But Hyperliquid improvement proposal for anyone who's not aware. HIP3 or HIP3 is builder deployed perps, and so anyone can list equities on chain or any type of perpetual future. And so we have equities, FX, really lots of different things. And then HIP4 is with expiration dates, so prediction markets, options, and that just launched I guess a couple weeks ago now, which really allows Hyperliquid to scale like beyond any crypto network has, in the sense that it's not just crypto, it's not just EVM, it's not just perps. Now we have this like whole new world that's really underexplored, and I guess happy to kind of touch on that. what do you guys think about the HIP3 deployments thus far? How's it been going? I guess it's been about a number of months now. Kind of a generic question, but like, how do you think how's the success been, and where do you think it's going for HIP3 and then beyond?
I mean, I think it's been very strong. Obviously, I don't know if anybody has seen like the Blockroots research that's come out in the last couple weeks, but during the volatile periods of people trading gold and silver, execution quality was comparable to COMEX, which is kind of incredible. Liquidity depth obviously not there given. I mean, those institutional exchanges are going to be going to have better depth, but I'd say pretty incredible at this point.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's still early days for HIP3, but we've seen very strong signs of growth in traders wanting exposure to these markets. I mean, when silver was trading, when we had the run up a couple of weeks ago, I think we did 2% of the COMEX's daily volume, which is pretty incredible. And as these deployers list new markets, new indices, new asset classes, it creates a catalyst for onboarding net new retail flow onto Hyperliquid, which we're very excited about.
I think ultimately it's beneficial to the user. There's a lot of these deployers have to compete to have the best product and the best listing for maybe similar or the same assets. And so while it might be confusing that there's 4 Tesla markets, with a different quote asset and different deployers, at the end of the day, this will kind of weed itself out and be a better experience for the end user and end trader.
Yeah, along those lines, we see HIP3 as like fundamentally very democratizing. It provides access to futures on categories that your average retail trader just couldn't touch before. And I think given the recent commodities run, like while that's really exciting, we're also really excited to see what other folks build in the next years and months ahead. We suspect there will be all sorts of interesting, unique perp is like on-chain trading card, etc. So.
Kind of want to pivot a little bit from kind of the success or how these things work to how we bring them to a wider audience. Just because these perps or these different things exist on chain, I think there's also like a distribution question about how do you reach the TradFi folks or the people who aren't familiar with Hyperliquid or crypto. And there's a big debate in the Hyperliquid community right now over whether the HL Foundation should do more to support marketing. On one hand of the argument, it's that Hyperliquid kind of has this Bitcoin-like genesis. It hasn't done any marketing to date, and it has been incredibly successful in this incredible rise without having to kind of prop itself up with advertisements and stuff. But then on the other side of things, a lot of people say, well, if you're going against like, Robinhood and the NASDAQ and all those guys, like they all have marketing. So how are you going to compete? I think I kind of fall on the side of just let it be organic and like build it and they will come. But I'm curious what you guys think. How can, should the HL Foundation be doing more to grow the tent? How do we distribute this to more people?
Yeah, I can kick off here. So at Circle, we've seen that product-led growth can take you really, really far. But at a certain point, you also have to tell a story. I think a lot of the people here in the room are intellectually persuaded by the power of Hyperliquid. We all see it. But centralized exchanges, of course, have a lot of casual users, non-crypto natives, half crypto natives, that are sort of just passively taking positions and using different activities. So it's going to be really incumbent on the builder codes push to embed Hyperliquid rails and experiences behind more traditional consumer apps. And I think all the teams up here, all the teams in the audience, like we can all help advance that.
Yeah, to double tap on that, I think growth goes beyond just marketing or paid acquisition. It's about creating incentives that supercharge distribution. And I think builder codes here is the answer, right? It is the way that we build the growth powerhouse for Hyperliquid. It's up to these teams to go out there and onboard net new users onto Hyperliquid through curated experiences, whether that be on mobile or web or whatever distribution channel makes sense. But I think Hyperliquid has done a great job of designing the incentive to supercharge that distribution.
Yeah, touch on that. Are you good? Okay. I guess this is a question, both Matt, Hanson as well. Curious on the institutional side, and we won't get into that too much in this panel. We have an institutional panel coming up, not next, but the one after. So stay tuned for that. But I'm curious, like, from your discussions with institutions, how did they see Hyperliquid, especially from the perspective that the front end is not regulated in the U.S. As well as just the complete on-chain transparency, which they might not be used to just from the traditional rails that they've been working with. And I guess I kind of have two questions. So maybe this one's for Hanson, and then I'm gonna dial back another question for you, Matt, about what you've been seeing in terms of the data and people coming in via USDC. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the perception has changed a lot in the last 2 years. I remember when, pre-TGE, we were kind of discussing the trade, so to speak, of the token launch with our clients. A lot of them considered it just another perp dex. The kind of full thesis hadn't been played out yet. There's a lot of miseducation around what the team was building and the vision they had to house all of finance. At this point, it's very clear that it's not just a perp dex, right? It's this whole L1 ecosystem. It's really, kind of transcending crypto in my mind. I personally think it's going to decouple a bit from other tokens in the asset class and really go head to head with more traditional equities. It's a very easy story to underwrite and pitch these traditional investors of free cash flow, PE multiples. It's a high margin business. It's a very compelling investment opportunity, but I guess going back to the perception, it's still not super easy to buy for a lot of investors. It's much easier now than it used to be. Just got a Coinbase listing. You can buy this token now and participate in the the rise of it in many different ways. There's public DATs. I know we have a couple speaking here later today, but none of that existed 2 years ago. And now we have the custodians also supporting it. Some of the biggest stablecoin issuers supporting it as well and investing in its future. And so the perception has changed tremendously for the better at this point.
And Matt, curious, you launched native USDC in September. And so I'm curious, what have you seen in terms of the flows of people coming in? Are you seeing kind of the same DeFi capital moving around? Are you seeing net new users from, other ecosystems?
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. The flows are completely different from what we were seeing a year or so ago, since we lit up native USDC and direct CCTP access for Hyper EVM. We've covered this already, but this was definitely most directly exemplified through Trade.xyz's silver and gold perps over the last few weeks. Those kinds of volumes can't come from existing DeFi capital. Like, it's mathematically impossible. So we're seeing quite a few folks onboarding and getting really excited about novel assets on Hyperliquid, which I think is, from what we hear from institutions and what Johnny will talk about on the panel later, easily the most exciting thing about Hyperliquid: asset diversification and creation.
Sorry, guys.
Thanks, man.
Drew, this question's for you. Native Markets said, and I'm just going to quote, USDH should be a gateway for Hyperliquid, the first step in the next chapter. That's in a blog post a little while ago. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what is the next chapter? And where does Native Markets fit in the stablecoin, and then beyond that, and helping bring people into Hyperliquid as well, especially in the U.S. Where the regulatory environment is kind of just like unfolding.
Yeah, I think it's a couple different things. I mean, I think it's the continued focus on different market and product creation. So things around HIP4, delivering different market structures, continuing to support different HIP deployers and new markets, as well as different spot markets. I think also in terms of as a gateway, focusing on our own distribution, making sure it's accessible to people over the globe, fiat and crypto transfers. I can't share too much about the exciting roadmap that we have planned, but those are how we view the gateway for US users and global users.
All right, guys, this is kind of the last question. I know before we said no timeline, but maybe there can be some estimates. I'm curious. I'm curious what you think. What does Hyperliquid look like in 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years in terms of market share? Have we eaten all of TradFi in 10 years? And best guesses, and if not, all good as well.
So, oh wow, that's loud. I would say that I'm not going to make any predictions on market share or anything like that, but I think Hyperliquid's front end UX will increasingly be abstracted behind wildly popular and delightful consumer experiences. So you'll just have Hyperliquid as the pipes behind a lot of other applications, and folks won't even know they're touching it, which is a win.
Yeah, I think off the back of that, which I agree with fully, it's going to have over 50% market share of crypto trading volumes.
In what time frame?
3 years.
All right.
I guess to quote Jeff, Hyperliquid has built incredible financial rails, in Jeff's own terms, the AWS for liquidity. Another thing Jeff has said is that there is room for exchange size empires to be built on top of Hyperliquid. And so within 10 years, hopefully sooner, exchange size empires will be built on Hyperliquid that compete with the tier 2, tier 1 CEX experiences out there. And on top of that, I think Hyperliquid will be the primary place where price discovery happens for the most important asset classes.
I think that's exactly right. I agree with Hanson on the 50% market share within 2 to 3 years. And I also think you'll see some global fintechs, deploy their own markets and, use it for distribution.
Thanks, guys. I agree with you too, Hanson. I think we're all thinking in the right direction. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining the panel. It's all I got today. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
And stay in the room. We've got the builder panel up next for all of our Hyper EVM builders and infrastructure providers. And so they've got a lot of good things to say too. Hyperliquid.